Hey guys, it's Greg with JHDrums.com. Welcome back to another drum mixing tutorial. Inside today's video, we are going to wrap up our kick drum processing, and we're going to do that by adding a noise gate plugin. We want to approach gating the kick drum differently than gating the snare drum, and I'll show you why. But first, let's go ahead and we will grab within our kick track, we'll grab the Dynamics, Noise Gate, and Mono. If you're in Logic, it's just the stock Noise Gate plugin. If you're in another DAW, of course, any gate will work. But the biggest difference here is going to be within our reduction setting. For kick drum, more than likely, you're going to reduce the signal that does not pass the gate 100%. Now with our snare, we only reduce the signal by 30 or 40 dB, which is still a considerable amount, but we wanted to make sure to retain the nuances of the snare, like the wires, the ghost notes, rolls, things like that, that the gate would have otherwise cut off. Now for the kick drum, we don't have to worry about those type of things. We have, the first punch, the resonant sound of that hit, and then the gate's out. We don't need that signal within our mix anymore. So that's where gating the kick drum differs from the snare. And if we zoom in here, go ahead and zoom into just our kick drum track. I went ahead and I've selected a section with the softest transients from the kick drum that I have, meaning that the kick drum was played quietly. And it just happens to be that in this song, it's very dynamic. There's a heavy chorus and a light verse, but just make sure that you're grabbing every hit that was played on the kick drum within your gate. And do that by zooming in, looking at the transients that have been captured, and make sure that we are grabbing those within our noise gate. So we'll do that by adjusting the threshold, monitoring our kick drum, and making sure that each one of those are grabbed. So I'll go ahead and solo the kick, and we'll play it, and we'll adjust our threshold to make sure that we're capturing every hit of the kick. See, at -50, if you pay attention to this activity button, when the snares hit, it's still activating the gate. See that? So that's what we want to fine tune here. So let's go ahead and bring our threshold up. See, now we're just hearing the kick. We might be able to go a little higher. And this is the one I'm worried about right here. Cool. All right, so we are activating our gate within our lower transients. So that's the first place to start, adjusting our threshold and fine-tuning it to make sure every hit is captured. The next thing we'll look at is the parameters within our gate again. The attack I like to keep similar to the attack parameter that we had set within our compression. So let's go for around a 6 millisecond attack. Remember when we added the gate to the snare, I mentioned that similar to the release setting on our compression, bring it up here. It's around 160 milliseconds. That's what I like to match with our hold. And let's go ahead and just make sure, well, maybe just a little bit longer to ensure that we're capturing that entire take. Listen to it again. Still a little quick, and that's where we want to pay attention to our release again. So we'll go ahead and adjust our release. And again, don't pay attention to the numbers, use your ears, make it sound natural. And imagine that, the sustain of the kick is as it rings out and it dies, that's what your release does. It will fade out as that kick drum tone fades out. So we'll go ahead and adjust that. Let's get into a busier section here, just for a little bit better monitoring. So I don't want it too quick. And again, I'm finding around 300 milliseconds on the release time gives us a natural sounding release on our gate. But within our parameters, remember to keep them set to a similar setting that you have within your compression plugin to keep a more natural sounding gate and to not clamp down. If you are a Logic user, you have the option of both hysteresis, which is not a disease, and we also have look ahead. Hysteresis is basically a second threshold setting that you have. So if we look at our initial threshold, we know that only signals over negative 19 dB are going to be allowed to pass through the gate, and that's when the gate is activated. The hysteresis says, okay, 3 dB below that, so at negative 22 dB, once the signal reaches that point, that's when I'm going to start to release, and that's when we get into the 300 millisecond setting there. So it sounds more complicated than it is, but it is a, kind of a secondary threshold where this initial one here is the in threshold, the activating threshold, and the hysteresis is the deactivating or the out. And we also have look ahead, which is important to basically keep our transients intact. It's a way to make sure that the plugin is aware of an upcoming transient and it's not going to overlook the attack. So it is a good idea to go ahead and match, at least for me, I like to match my attack setting with my look ahead so that I know that it's paying attention to the 6 milliseconds ahead of, the actual time when it's playing, and it knows when that hit's coming in. So that's another thing to take a look at. But let's check out what this has done just within this softer part here. Go ahead and turn off our loop. And we'll preview it without. Go ahead and solo. Make sure we'll go ahead and turn up the kick so we can hear it. So we'll preview it 2 bars without and 2 bars with. And we'll monitor the difference here. And just notice all the bleed that we get. Snare, hi-hat, and then with it engaged, all we're getting is the kick. And that's what we want. Let's listen to a more busy section here. Notice with that longer release, see, it had enough time where it wasn't played in this section. There's a little bit of a gap here, a little bit of a gap here, but it's natural enough to where it's allowing all these transients to consistently come through. So keeping a more, conservative gate is important. We don't want to completely, destroy the signal. but we do want to provide as much headroom as we can within our mix. Remember that corny metaphor I had of the overhead being our Polaroid picture, whereas our kick, snare, and toms are subjects. Take a listen to this. I'm going to play it about halfway through, and then at that point, I'm going to mute the overheads. And I want you to listen to what's going on with the snare and the kick. I'll go ahead and mute the toms for now. But listen, as I play, I'll mute the overhead bus. And listen to what the gates have accomplished in removing the bleed, adding headroom, etc. And you'll see the purpose of doing this. Natural sounding. But they're just being added as subjects to our picture, the overheads. So guys, that's the whole point of noise gating. Remember that gating kick is going to be different than the snare. The reduction in most cases is going to be, a full-on gate where we're reducing 100%, but keep it natural. Make sure that the entire sound of the kick is captured within the gate and that every transient is allowed through it. And you'll have a much better sounding mix in the end, and you'll have plenty of headroom for whatever else lies in your mix, guys. So do this and make better drum mixes, guys. That'll be it for today's video. In the next video, we'll look at EQing our toms and getting the sound that we want out of each. So be sure to stay tuned for that. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments below, guys. Greg for JHDrums.com. We'll see you in the next video.